had me at cello, cello. You had me at cello. You had me at cello. Oh, you had me at cello. Good afternoon, everybody. Look at the time. It's 5 o'clock on a Friday again. So that means time for another episode of Cello Chat. This week, Amy Harr is joining us, and I'm super excited to talk to you, Amy. But how are you doing?
Doing great, thanks. Yeah, it's
Excellent.
almost August, so
I know, this summer.
starting to plan for the fall semester, but not too soon.
Doesn't seem that long ago at the beginning of this summer that we got together with the IST meeting, and then here it is
Right.
this far all the way through.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, glad to hear you're doing well. And so for the sake of the viewers, can we start with what got you started specifically on the cello? And then what was your path that took you to where you are now?
Okay. Well, I grew up in a musical family here in Madison and started in my mom's youth choir at church, and my dad was the adult choir director. And then we started taking piano lessons, I think in second grade. And then when strings was offered in fourth grade at the time in my elementary school, I was all in. And I think I just maybe had seen some people playing the cello, and I thought the violin was too common, you know. And I just said, I want to play the cello. And I remember my mom saying, well, are you sure you want to carry that? And I was like, yep, I'll do it. And that was pretty much it. So,
Nice.
yeah. That was at Thoreau Elementary in Madison with Hiram Piercy, who passed away a couple of years ago, and some hitting that period where some of our old teachers are no longer with us, and it's kind of neat to be back in Madison and, you know, continuing their legacy in some ways.
For sure.
Yeah.
But then, and it's neat now that you've come full circle. Training was in Madison and playing in WYSO, etc. But then
Right.
journeys to Colorado and Texas before coming back. How did those go?
Yeah, so I went through pretty, great music program at West High. We had Fine Arts Week every year and did a ton of performing with that, piano and cello. I did piano up into college a couple of years. And then went to UW and all the way through WYSO, excuse me, music clinic, UW. And then I went to Rice University for the master's, which was a focus in chamber music and orchestral performance. And tons of people from Rice around that period were, getting orchestral jobs, and it's a great training program. And I was doing a lot of private study and chamber music there too. So then I got a job in the Houston Ballet Orchestra right out of grad school, and I was engaged, and my husband got a job in the Colorado Symphony in the same week. We both won our auditions. So we had been already chasing each other around the country for a couple of years, having met at a summer music festival. And I ended up doing that kind of a commute situation between Houston and Denver for a while, which worked okay because ballets, you would have like 2 reps and you'd do 6 weeks there, and then you'd have a month off or so and go back and do a month of Nutcrackers and then be off for 6 weeks and then do 2 more ballets. So that was great experience, and but at a certain point that wasn't sustainable. So I moved to Denver and did a whole lot of freelancing and Broadway shows. It was kind of a hub for touring Broadway shows at Denver Center, and more ballets, operas, subbing in orchestras, church gigs, chamber music, teaching. I did the full Suzuki training at DU with Carol Tarr, and eventually, so unfortunately, my husband died of melanoma in 2009, and we moved back to Madison about a year later, 2 years later. And so now I'm back, like I said, doing all the same kind of freelancing stuff here. And during that time, though, I was mostly focused on raising my son and I think between like second grade for him and college, where he is now. I didn't teach as much, but was working back into the freelancing. And now that he's gone and I have an empty nest, he's studying jazz piano, which is really cool. Just getting much more back into teaching. So this year I'll have more than ever. But all of that life experience too, and the parenting and the work with grief and the work that I did with him with yoga and everything has been part of what's helped me like sustain myself as a cellist and give insights to students, I think, and just a pretty full life really as a freelancer. It makes your taxes complicated, but you know, all of the 1099s and extra income and different stuff, self-employment things, but it's been pretty rich musically.
Sounds very rich musically. And we'll come back to that topic of that huge variety of experiences. But I think particularly for the audiences of this series, a number of them are like my own students, some trying to see, okay, I've heard some about what life is like as a performance major freelancing, but if you can go into some more specifics about the degree to which doors sometimes open for you and you never say no, you know what I mean? Even if it's outside your comfort zone, I imagine. And then sometimes you have to proactively make sure that these and those people are aware of you and you're playing. So can you talk about what that scene is like?
Sure. I mean, some of it comes about by being in the right place at the right time, or, you know, putting yourself out there as well. But certain times someone else may have been leaving a city or shifting their career, and I was able to step in. So that's where you say like, oh yes, like I had a choice between going on tour with Houston Ballet one summer or taking an 8-week run of Beauty and the Beast in Denver. And that was my foot in the door to start doing shows and getting known in Denver. So I did that. And yeah, I've said yes to a lot of different things. It's made a really interesting variety. At a certain point, you kind of start to weigh that though after, you know, a number of years, or like after having a baby, for instance, sometimes that changes the scene. And a lot of people still do this where you're driving between different cities to play in different orchestras, or you know, you get a gig somewhere and how far do you want to travel? How much on the road is worth it? How much, you know, driving in the mountains in Colorado in the winter is worth it for the amount that a certain orchestra might pay to sub. But usually when you're young and pretty new and trying to get that foot in the door, you'll say yes to all of that and, you know, figure out some good carpools and get to know people. And then, you know, you can weigh it as you get older and get a little bit more secure and established and go, maybe my priorities have shifted a little bit. So I'd rather do more teaching at home, or I'll do the gigs that are more local, or, you know, you just shift your priorities around as needed.
Weddings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And depending what's needed, obviously, in your community and at the time. So I've done, though, a bunch of different things, like when they called us to play in an ice orchestra in the mountains in Colorado. This guy had sculpted instruments out of ice and, you know, invited a few of us to go up and try to play them. And that was a real adventure, which is worth having, you know, didn't pay much, but that's something we've got in our, you know, back pocket and a photo of and a little radio interview of. So that's pretty cool. And then, you know, rock shows, played a couple of those in Denver at big arenas, little folk stages where you sit in with people, and yeah, certainly some strange requests from time to time. So now I'm back to doing weddings. I am in a gigging quartet, Camerata string quartet, and we do usually close to 50 gigs a year, which is some churches, but mostly weddings. and all over the state and a little bit out of state sometimes. So yeah, you just patch together what you can. I've always said it's kind of a patchwork career. And that patchwork keeps changing over time, which things you'll say yes to. But it's a lot of fun, and it's like I said, it's a great variety. So it keeps it interesting.
Mm-hmm. But now, even when you came back to Madison, it seems like you got plugged in right away, and that had to have a proactive component too. Some of the things have auditions, like Madison Symphony and Wisconsin Chamber Orchestra, but some of the things don't. So how did you go about, even when you moved back, kind of just getting connected to the musical scene?
Yeah. I mean, from my perspective, it did take a little while, but having grown up here too, there were some connections. And like I said, I spent a little more attention, especially that sort of after school and weekend time on my son for those years. But I would definitely meet back up with people. You know, for instance, in my quartet, I used to be a student teacher with Layla, and now she's, you know, my colleague in the quartet. And so,
Fun.
You know, when their previous cellist moved, that was a way that we stayed connected, and I tried subbing with them, and then that became more permanent. So things like that, I would just have coffee with people or go to their concerts and talk to them. At first I took the sub auditions and, wasn't, or Madison Symphony auditions and didn't get in. It was not the ideal time when you have a 6-year-old and have just moved and, lost somebody, and it wasn't the best time to be taking auditions. But gradually then I started, coaching with WYSO. And so then I knew, Carl and all the people at WYSO, and slowly you get, asked to do some subbing there, and then you do a good job, you're reliable, you are a good colleague, and that kind of thing keeps happening. I definitely had some church connections too, through both my parents and their lifetimes of work in Madison and different choir directors I knew. And sometimes those things lead you to, doing some other choral, accompanying an orchestra, accompanying a choir gig. And then even the UW contacts I had, such as like Andy Abrams, he is doing this Capital City Theater now, and I was able to, reconnect with him and start playing some of those shows. So it's a lot about keeping your connections, and you do end up with this like worldwide web of musician friends and connections, which is cool for traveling, and it's cool for if you move or you need references, keeping up good relationships. And yeah, I wouldn't say I aggressively put myself out there right away. I kind of let it naturally evolve a little bit. But if I had, really needed to, hustle a little more, I just would have gone a little bit more, intentionally at asking for gigs, getting hired. You can always make connections with people and say, here's my resume, I'm available. And, some of those will lead you to somewhere else, and some of those will lead you to a job. So
nice.
Yeah.
All right. Hey, can we go back for a moment? I didn't realize at Rice that your major was orchestral and chamber music?
Yeah, I think they call it a master's degree in cello performance and orchestral studies.
Okay.
But they really focus there on orchestra and chamber music, and obviously your studio and recitals. But they sort of limit it. There's no education program. There's no jazz program. They've got the orchestra, the opera, and everybody does a lot of chamber music and new music. And then, it's just a great training program. There was Larry Ratcliffe, who's also just recently left us, in orchestra. And there's just a huge legacy with him, with people in orchestras all over. Just really great, precise, listening, very specifically orchestra training, and people that just rose to the level of winning auditions straight out of there in a big way. So it was really great. So I had most of my cello studies and chamber music with Norman Fisher, and whose sister lives and works here in Madison. And again, small world. And he's just so, such a big mentor, and opens, you up to expressing your full self and playing all kinds of music was just great. I think of him with great generosity of just music making and his teaching and encouraging students as a community and encouraging you to go out and do all kinds of festivals and chamber music and start your own whole thing, you know, and
Yeah.
So that was some really memorable chamber music making too there.
I've always been very impressed with his master classes, like just
Mm-hmm.
even at last year's ASTA conference, just really so many takeaways.
Mm-hmm.
But what I was actually going to ask about, this kind of relates to a conversation at the Whitewater Cello Studio, or at least something we touched on. Do you find that with all of the pit work that you've done, that the nature of pit playing, probably more in things like operas than in ballet, where even if you rehearsed it this way, you still are your antenna are up all the time, not only the baton, but what you're hearing, cues
Mm-hmm.
around you and everything, that requires quite a bit of chamber music skills as well, to always be as tight as possible. Like a good chamber music performance, you're never, or I never, ideally, in my opinion, like not like, okay, this is exactly how we're going to play it. No, we're going to play it something like that, but we're going to be alive and in the moment, and
Mm-hmm.
we're never going to lose our focus or take our eye off the ball.
Yeah, for sure. And we were talking a little bit about bringing the yoga into the conversation. And it was pretty much in Houston where I first got started. We had this great yoga teacher there, Robert Bustani. And I feel like that relates in the way of like when you're doing yoga and listening to more parts of your body and connecting your breath with your movement. And it sort of forces you to be aware of your body and of what's going on. You can't really ignore little sticky places or anything. And then also I've learned from that just kind of how to be aware of more than one area of your body at the same time. And to me, that at the time directly related to playing music, because I think of it as like an open awareness type of thing where you're focused on what you're doing, but you're also able to be aware of other things going on around you. And sometimes I would use that even as like a little exercise to see like how many parts of the orchestra can I be listening to at the same time while playing my part, you know, precisely. And sometimes you're more focused on just your section and the blend and being super together. But overall, it is that, you know, watching the conductor out of one eye, watching your principal maybe out of the same eye, and then listening to all around the orchestra and obviously the percussion or whoever has the most moving part at that time or who you're trying to blend with. So to me, that gave me a lot of skills in that sort of responsiveness and chamber music aspect. Obviously, I use it in chamber music and like contemporary music too, where you really have to put things together. Pit wise, that's true though. You're definitely listening to singers, to, you know, cues and dialogue, to things that might, you have a vamp where you don't know how long it's going to take and you're going to play it a number of times until that next cue comes, which keeps you on your toes. Usually with those productions, though, you're playing it a bunch of times, so you do get pretty used to the cues. And I find it's almost kind of fun and relaxing for me to play something a million times in a row because I get really, really able to play the part exactly how I want to play it, but not in that rigid way. Just
Yeah,
like
there you go.
you've got it refined down to like, this is how I do this. This is how I want it to go. And I can be listening all around. And sometimes, you know, sometimes it helps you catch if somebody skips a line or something, or somebody skips a beat, and then you have to like jump in and kind of be flexible, right? So
nice.
so I feel like that helps. Yeah, and you're sometimes really far away, feeling like down in the pit, to being able to have any influence on it, but you're definitely listening and trying to be responsive.
And you have quite a bit of yoga training.
Yeah, so I ended up doing a yoga teacher training down there with Robert, and then went up here when I got back to Madison in alignment yoga. And I've practiced it, to greater or lesser degrees. I guess that's, going on 40 years, so, or 35 years. And I've taught at different times. We've recently started with a friend of mine. She was working with me a little bit on some arm, wrist, shoulder issues, kind of over the pandemic. And she and I have organized some classes for musicians, which have been held down at the WYSO building recently. So, and I was just thinking she might be able to do one, on Zoom if people were interested. And because from working with me, she developed quite a few specific exercises that really do help with our overuse type things in cello playing specifically, or string playing. But also it's great for just down regulating the nervous system. The world can be complicated and scary and weird. And then over the pandemic, everyone was kind of disoriented, and it helps in that way for nerves, I think, too, for performance anxiety. I've found ways of like really centering like deep down in the abdomen, where you might tend to grip and hold tension. You don't want to do that when you're playing, because it's scary enough to, that something might happen with your bow shaking or something. So that's all helped me regulate nerves, and even help students with performances coming up. And yeah, the yoga, I've taught also some classes to like Gilda's Club, which is a cancer survivor group. So all of it kind of ties together with like being able to like go deeper that way internally, feel stuff, offer it to other people. Yeah, it's great for the body, mind, mental health, breathing, all that.
And your martial arts training as well, would you include that?
A little bit. Yeah, I mean, I did karate mostly with my son over those maybe third grade into sophomore years of school, and did get a black belt, which was cool just to be able to say that I have. That's another thing that I find sometimes helps me relate to students now, is having some similar activities. Obviously there's a lot of discipline with karate, and it's a very, you can step by step, you're going to learn more things and get stronger and stronger. So it parallels learning an instrument fairly well. Different muscle groups sometimes involved, but it was very good for focus. And I would see that with the kids in the classes. Like I was in the parent class, and usually our kids were more advanced than us, which is also a cool relationship to have, if you can let your kid coach you a little bit in something they're a little bit better at better than you at. And I have students, who sometimes have even come to me because they said, oh, you do karate, I do karate too. Or now I'm in a tap dance class for adults, which is, I kind of converted from the karate because the karate stuff was a little bit still irritating my arms at a certain point. Or like, I was also, Benna was done with it and I was done with it. But the dance also relates to me like in a musical and stylistic way, but it's a little more, lower body related. You don't have to do as much, gives the arms a break for a cellist.
Right. But super good for not just rhythm, but articulation precision, right?
Yeah, it's listening, and it's also like a really good, just keeping your mind and body connected in a new way. I also feel like those activities, the karate, the dance, things like that, even playing the piano. Well, piano was something I'd done for a long time, but there's sort of a beginner's mind quality to starting something else and realizing how much of a learning curve there is and how things don't necessarily come naturally right away. And it's helped me look at students and go, yeah, this is pretty complicated. Let's break this down. Let's practice this one part a bunch of times. Let's get this good warm up in, And then, you'll be able to integrate those pieces once you break it down. And even like for me, if I don't practice in between, my once a week class, or you wait till the last day and practice a half hour before the class, I go, guess what? That's real. That doesn't work as well as if you did 10 minutes a day. And I'm using that on my students now.
Yeah.
But
That's
it's fun to relate to, dancing or karate or whatever hobbies you might have too.
I love that. That's a great takeaway, that beginner mindset. And it keeps one also always focused on the importance of the fundamentals.
Right.
If you're trying to work on something up here and wondering why something isn't quite going right, very often it's like it wasn't a high end something or other. It's one of the fundamentals. It just wasn't right
Set.
how it needed to be. Okay, so motivating students. You mentioned finding out kind of what activities they're into and those sorts of things. But if there's anything else you want to share along the lines of motivating students when they need that little bit of help, please do. What are the thoughts you have?
Yeah. I was thinking about this, and I feel like it's pretty individual to the kid, depending what their motivations are. I try to get to know them enough to kind of respond when they respond to something, or give them a thought. Stickers work for some kids, right? Practice charts work for some kids. Some kids are supernaturally motivated, and I have to just get them to like slow down enough to say, let's break down these goals and do it a little bit at a time instead of just play. And some kids have been reluctant to want to perform in front of anybody. And sometimes I'll say like, well, that's okay. You don't have to, but let's work this up and let's see if you maybe record it at home, your dad records it, or we do it here with a duet and we watch it and then we refine it a little bit, polish it up. Maybe you just send it to your grandparents for a holiday present, your little video playing with a duet with your teacher. And then they'll maybe work up to wanting to play for solo and ensemble the next year. And like now I have one kid who was like that. He's like, I think I want to do a concerto competition next year. Okay, awesome. And it just depends. Like I also have some kids, who are autistic or neurodivergent in some way. You just really have to kind of figure out what makes them work. And I feel like I try to take some time with that and offer some creative ideas. I don't know that I have like a list of them, but I just respond to them. And, one kid, I just was like, just for fun, let's try playing it. I'll play the right hand and you play the left hand, and then we'll switch, and it's awkward and hard to do, but it was kind of a fun little interesting game that got his brain thinking in a different way, or it was kind of a fun little experiment. Or sometimes I'll be like, you might want to, write your own piece someday. It sounds like you've got some ideas, and I'll give them a sheet of staff paper, and then they'll come back having written a whole piece, or something.
Great.
So I don't know. It's just individual to the kid. I find it really interesting. I really like kids. I sort of always liked being at the kids' table at a holiday just because I think I'm curious about them. And they're wildly interesting. They're so different. And one girl, like, I will not shy away from bringing out the Taylor Swift and the Star Wars books either. Sometimes that really motivates them to learn something that's somewhat familiar, but they might have to learn a new position or a new extension or a new key signature or how you read some rhythms, even though you can do it the way they sing it and not exactly how it's notated. But we talk about that too. You can be free with this. Once you learn how to count rhythms and rests, then you can free it up a little bit like a singer would. So I do that. And then I had a like a 9-year-old sister playing the Taylor Swift, and I asked her 6-year-old sister what she would like to play. Because she said, I might want to play one of those. And I said, well, do you like Taylor Swift? She's like, eh. I said, well, what do you want to play? And she said, I want to learn Happy Birthday because I want to play it for my dog. A 6-year-old. So I'm like, sure, we can learn Happy Birthday on the cello. Totally appropriate for you. And I want a video, so just see what they want to play. And then like, okay, so we'll do one piece out of your Suzuki book. We'll learn these scales. We'll maybe do this position book. And then we'll have your, pop piece or a duet or something. I had 2 kids this year who I felt like were sort of friends and slightly rivals, like 2 6th, 7th grade boys. And I was like, would you like to have lessons this summer where one of you comes for a half hour, then you both overlap for a half hour, and then the other one has a half hour. So you can do duets. Also, I can teach you like positions and stuff together. I don't have to say the same thing twice. And they were like all about it. And so they said, yeah, let's do that. And so they get to see each other a little over the summer. They're kind of keeping up with each other. Like, he's learning 4th position already. Like, do you want to come back to school and already know that? And then they can, they brought in some Avengers duet that they wanted to learn. And I gave him some Bois Mortier, and so it worked out really well. So sometimes the little bit of healthy competition or just wanting to, hit that next achievement. So people will be like, oh, maybe I want to learn vibrato, but I don't know how to do it. And I'm like, yep, not yet. But what if you went back and showed your teacher, like you knew that already, or you knew about thumb position? And sometimes I'll just go, I saw your brain like forming neurons right there. Like I saw that connection, and some of them get excited about the fact that like, oh, wait, I might be kind of smart at this, or I might be learning something that I thought was really hard, but I'm kind of doing it. And so I just try to point out that they're getting something out of it, even if it's not their favorite piece in the book or whatever. I'll go, oh, wait, you really got that bowing once we slowed it down, or listen to that sound that you just made, listen to that ring. That was awesome, and getting them to listen and kind of be curious about their own learning and their own sound has been a motivator for some of them. So.
Yeah, that word curious crops up a lot in these contexts. But so then your own experience, you've played in a wide variety of styles outside of classical music, and even within the classical world, everything from early to lots of modern stuff. I guess first of all, I'm a little bit curious too, how much of that was by design? Was that all the sort of stuff that you listened to? Or again, was it just like, okay, here opportunity is knocking, I'm going to figure out how to play that? And then second of all, do you find that wide variety of stylistic knowledge is also useful in connecting with the different things that drew your various students to the cello?
Yeah. I would say I grew up pretty strictly classically trained and listening as well. Not too much pop music in my high school background even. So I was pretty focused and disciplined about it way back then. So that did kind of come along later, a little bit with just listening to music with my husband, or then, like you said, those opportunities that just came along, like, can you play in this string octet backing up David Byrne at the Bluebird Theater in Denver? I'm like, yes, I can. And that was super cool. And, and then tango, he was in a tango group and I played with them some and did a little bit even on piano with that. So a lot of it was situational, I guess, that something came along and I would learn it. And like quartet now, we do probably even more pop than classical for weddings these days. I'd say it's a pretty mixed, but even within a wedding, it can be completely mixed. So I've learned a lot of songs and just pieces that I didn't know before at all, just through, people requesting them. But yeah, it's certainly helpful for relating to the kids, the students, and also guiding them towards, here's some possibilities you can do with music. You're in your school orchestra right now. You might want to be in WYSO. That gives you exposure to more kids who are into this and more complex pieces. You could also, play for a church or play for some community group, or you could play for your family, or you could, like, I've got ninth grade students maybe teaching a middle schooler, a little bit down the block. And that's good for them too in their own learning. Like, you could make a little money if you, teach some lessons, or sometimes if you put your case out and play for people, sometimes that's their motivator. So, and then kids are just curious about what do you do, like, for music, or what do you do in all these jobs? And I can say it's been a really cool variety. I've played for some rock stars. I've played for, these in the mountains on ice instruments, whatever.
So
played by myself for people in hospice. That's been a super moving experience, to just go and sit by someone's bedside with their blind cat and play music that they loved. And I find that, like, even playing weddings, funerals, church services, things like that, really rewarding, just because there's like a ritual involved in, like, times of life, or even church, your time of the week or something. And music is going to elevate that to a higher emotional level, and it really connects people. So nothing, less glamorous really about playing those, because it's a meaningful experience for some people. And even with ballet, sometimes we'd see from the pit or a show, we'd see someone, you're doing like 8 shows a week or whatever, and you're like, okay, here's another one Sunday afternoon or something. And you're kind of slogging through the week, but somebody might be in that front row. Like, we had a mom and a daughter once, and they looked like they'd never been to a ballet before. They had like a really kind of set in stone facial expressions. Looked like it was like nothing was gonna move them. And this was Nutcracker. And we saw, like, I remember my stand partner and I just watching them going, are they ever gonna crack a smile or something? And like the one scene where the little children all run out from the Mother Ginger skirts, they both suddenly just like lit up and smiled and like were totally turned on. And you kind of thought, wow, this might be like the one time in their year it was a special Christmas thing or something to go to the ballet. And like, who knows what their lives were like, but this was like brightening it up in a huge way and just a special experience for them. And you're like, okay, I guess every show there's people like that maybe out there. So it's, worth putting it out there for, and musicals the same way, different. You're going to get a different audience from, maybe people that come to the symphony or contemporary music or whatever. So whatever's moving people to come to, your job is to be there and express stuff fully, express, humanity, be a live audience, a live orchestra. So they see the, humanity involved in that communication we were talking about, and the responsiveness, and that this was that Sunday afternoon show that we saw, and it, it moved us. That's cool.
Well said, Amy, for sure. But I also have to note some people's aesthetic face, their game face when they're experiencing art is very different. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
Like, there's a particular house concert that comes to mind where the whole time we were playing, there's certain people that I just thought, wow, we're not connecting with them at all because they're stone face. But just afterwards at the reception, just
True.
oh, and they're clearly connected to everything that was going on, but this was their face when they're in art.
It's hard to respond to, but that's true. You never know what's going on in people's mind or personal experience. Yeah. Hard as a performer to, like, I listen to a lot of like
give me something.
Yeah, I listen to a lot of like comedians podcasts just for kind of a break, and from music, and they all say that too, like, oh, give me something. It's so hard to play to feeling like a dead room, even if someone comes up and says it was awesome.
It's true.
Yeah.
All right. Things coming down the pike for the remainder of 2024. Performances or
let's see.
Plans?
Yeah, I mean, I do have the Madisonian Music Ensemble I'm a member of. I don't know that we have a set date yet, but there's a Facebook page for that, and there's a YouTube channel. So some of our more recent performances are on that. So Madisonian Music Ensemble, we're doing a few concerts a year of music written, like he likes to say, since 1980-ish, mostly living composers. This is organized and led by Joe Koikar, who I also had worked with a little bit at UW back in the day. And, we're constantly trying to find new, diverse composers to present, and that's a nice challenge. So you can look for that on the Facebook page. I do have one concert coming up at the First Unitarian in November with Danielle Brysock and Michael Keller, flute trios. Otherwise, it's sort of, we'll wait and see. Some of these, like I have a lot of weddings, obviously. I coach with WYSO, which is another full circle thing, having been a member of it from, 6th grade on, and now I'm a chamber music coach. So those are always fun concerts. And yeah, most of the stuff this semester so far is what's coming up for teaching.
Yeah, big studio.
Yeah, I mean, now I'm at Farley's House of Pianos, and I'll be doing a little bit more with Madison Country Day School, teaching their middle school level cellists. So it adds up, and then the other freelance stuff, as we've talked about, will come along as it comes along. Sometimes I play something with my son or my mom or my students or something. So all of that, like I said, is not necessarily as equally monetarily rewarded, but usually emotionally it's pretty rewarding.
Yeah. And that's a big part of why we're in this field.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I remember having some questions and thoughts about going into other fields, and it was always like, there's more I want to do with this, and I want to be part of this expression of all this cool art, and I just want to keep doing it with my days, not just, as a hobby. So it had me hooked.
Here. I'm with you.
Right.
Excellent. All right. Well, hey, thanks so much, Amy. This has been real fun talking.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm happy to know about your cello chats too, and get some more tips for my teaching as well.
All right.
From the other episodes.
Well, best of luck with the upcoming fall semester, and I know our paths will cross.
I expect so. Yep.
All right.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much. And to all of you out there, best of luck with practicing all week. Let's meet back the same time on Friday. See you then.
You had me at cello, cello, you had